welcome to Life Support Live, the weekly live show that explores how Star Trek can boldly go in our own lives to better ourselves and the rest of humanity.
As a famous starship commander, not that one, but another one, once famously said, and as another one famously said, wherever our mission takes us, we will try to have a little fun along the way.
Oh, my friend, Dr. Trek, I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Ali Matu. I am 50% of Life Support Live.
And I heard you're a clinical psychologist, too.
Yeah. I was like, what am I? Well, right now, I'm here.
Well, he's Dr. Ali. I'm Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek. And one of us is a real doctor, allegedly.
Yeah, or plays one on YouTube. Everyone, we're going to have a fun episode today. It's a Mother's Day special here on Life Support Live. And we are talking about our favorite lessons from our favorite Star Trek moms. So let us know, what are the big takeaways you've had from different Star Trek moms all over the years? Dr. Trek,
Yep.
Question for you.
I'm just going to tell everybody, I want to apologize to everybody and warn them that whatever I say on Tuesday may not last until Saturday. So if you heard me mention something else this week earlier, if you were at Tuesday's Live, just, put that back in your bag and hang on to it. Because it's Mother's Day Eve, and we realized, of course, we should talk about moms. But I like what Dr. Ali came up with. We're not just gonna. We could sit here and list Star Trek moms till the cows came home, or till those cows on that the pilot of Lower Decks, the spider cows came home. We could do that all day, but we're saying, what are some lessons we have learned from specific Star Trek moms?
Did you make an announcement of what we were going to talk about?
I said, look at this. We've already got a theme because we talked about it Monday night.
Mm-hmm. The best laid plans of Life Support Live hosts often go awry.
Fine print in your contract, everybody. You see, we have.
Well, speaking of getting oriented, Larry, if this is the first time here for folks, what is Life Support Live?
I didn't spit take because it go all over my keyboard. Your first time, that's awesome. Yes, hi everybody. We have a wonderful community. If you haven't seen the chat window, all three of our platforms have chat. Now, you're only seeing Facebook if you're on Facebook, but you're seeing all three if you're on Twitch or YouTube. But hey, if you're new, jump in there. We've got a great Lifers community. But what we're doing here, supposedly, as I read the log line of the show, hey, we are boldly going through uncertain times. And you know what? Even our uncertain times seem uncertain, because it's like, at least a few months ago, we knew exactly where we are. And now everybody, depending on where you are in the world, everybody's in a different place with the pandemic, with the crazy people around I shouldn't say crazy people. With the state of the population and culture and everything reintegrating, we're all a little right now, even though we're feeling hopeful. So I feel like there's still some uncertainty out there. So our basic mission is still intact. But hey, all we're doing here is geeking out with Star Trek, looking at it through a mental health lens, or mental health through a Star Trek lens. We have a lot of fun along the way, and hopefully we send you home with a little more about Star Trek and a little more about how to just navigate these uncertain times.
Hey, Larry, that was great. That was a really. Now I know what to talk about. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Okay. So in true Life Support fashion, yeah, we had a different idea of what we were gonna do. And then I said, Larry, you think there's enough mother-children relationships for us to talk about? Like, I was like, Larry, I can only think of these three. And then Larry was
like, a week to think about this. I'll have to do some research.
Larry was like, are you kidding me? And then just a list of all these really great moms and really complex, like, not just one-offs, but like mothers that we have seen over the course of many episodes. And he's like, have you heard of Amanda? And I was like, well, yeah, but besides the original series, do we see her again? And then Larry's like, Kelvin and Discovery. It was fun. And then we were trying to think like, okay, what's a unique way to talk about this topic and not just make it about like, oh, let's just talk about moms.
Mom list.
Yeah, mom list. We didn't want to do a mom list. So we got this idea of the best lessons from Star Trek mothers, our favorite lessons from our favorite Star Trek moms. And yeah, this is sort of in honor of Mother's Day, which is something that many parts of the world will be celebrating tomorrow. So Larry, there's a lot here that we could go into. We're not going to do a big list of our moms. We're going to try to keep it a little bit more thematic as we go into the briefing room here. Let's talk.
Jen.
Let's yeah. Let's actually talk about. Let's go back to the very beginning here. And
Well, I mean, we say that, and we can go on and on forever, and just start thinking about it because I'm like we have the Federation moms, we have the alien culture moms, we've got the culture of the week moms, and we've got the oh wait, that's an alien mom. So and I know everybody's already
and the non-humanoid.
It's going to get really crazy in the chat. I know it's going to get really populated with all kinds of ideas. I just hope I'm coming in good today. Yes, but
You're coming in great.
Okay, good.
Coming in loud and clear, Dr. Trek.
Give it 15 minutes and we'll see what's happening. But as you look at Star Trek and across the generations, and like you intimated there, especially now, again.
But not generations.
Mega mom.
Don't look at generations. There's no moms in generations.
Are you sure? I bet if we dug deep
Guinan? Do you think Guinan's a mom?
I mean, Guinan's a mom. She has kids.
Guinan's a mom. Yeah.
Yes. She has one that's a few hundred years old at least. Turkham, I think, is his name. The only
that's impressive.
That went out of the old orifice. No, I think if we look at Star Trek, there's two. I said there's at least two mega moms. I don't mean mega as in they're the God's gift to the universe. I mean they're
the mega moms.
They occupy the most space as a mother in Star Trek, and one of them is probably the original Star Trek mom, if we don't count the Horta. Yeah. And of course, that's Jane Wyatt's Amanda, but now we've had at least 3 people play Amanda over the years. And 4 if you don't count Majel Barrett being her voice on the animated series. But that's a beautiful shot, for a publicity shot, which never gets seen very often. But that's the one I like. Let's just paint Amanda in all of her across the generations glory. And I don't know the artist, but that popped up, obviously, in the last couple of years. I love that so much. It's like, yes, folks, weird families can be weird, especially if they're Vulcan. If they're interspecies marriages on Vulcan, they can have their weird little shadows.
Larry, you know who that person on the left looks like?
Camera left or audience left?
Camera left. That looks like that could be Michael Burnham.
Yeah.
I don't remember the episode, so I have no idea who the character actually.
The chat's got to help Ali out. No, this is not an actual, Filmation cell from 1974. This is Amanda and Spock are, but an artist has gone back and put in Michael and put in Cybok.
Oh, that's Cybok?
Yes, that's not Jesus back there. Vulcan Jesus.
He's like the awkward family. He's like, I guess I'm in this picture, but I really don't want to be in.
He's like, really, Dad? Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Michael's also like, is this Vulcans only? Am I allowed in this photo?
Yeah.
Or not?
It's okay. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a great image.
That's for all the people that went, what? She can't be in the family. I go, you're forgetting about wacky older part brother Cybok, who kind of like zoned in and zoned out. Dad, you got married again? Dad, you're really going to bring in another stray? Okay. I totally see it. Sarek's a weird cat, but today's not Father's Day. It's Mother's Day. So
no, we'll save that. We'll save that for about a month from now.
And I can just hear what Cybok heard when his dad remarried and got Perrin. It's like, oh, Dad, really? Okay, fine. I'm just going to go over here and be a little weirder. Okay.
Well, if we talk about...
But Amanda, what lessons do we learn?
Yeah. So if we look at Amanda's role in that family, and especially if we just we could focus on, I don't know if we can talk. We could probably talk a little bit about Cybok, There's definitely a lot we could talk about with Michael, but the breadth of experience with the breadth of our exposure to Amanda is through the lens of Spock. And if you look at their relationship, boy, it is really central to Spock when it comes to dealing with any emotional aspect or any aspect of his more human side. Who does he go to? He goes to Amanda. He doesn't go to
Well,
his dad.
I
Um,
was well. I was laughing. It's like, well, who would anybody go to between those two? But of an all Vulcan family, it's. Do you look at it as it's with Vulcans? It's like, is it repression or is it that's just the Vulcans' way? Which it is. But then we fall into the stereotype, which we as fandom and maybe even writers did for a long time, which is falling into that Vulcan stereotype. But over the years, kind of starting with Cybok, maybe a little, we've seen actually an iticness full of Vulcans. I mean, we've seen a whole range. We've heard of Vulcan, factions, just politically, culturally. We've seen the range of Vulcans dealing with each other, and some of them are more open, some of them are more narrow-minded and shut down, and some of them are more open-minded. And my God, Sarek's got to win the open-minded, crazy Vulcan of the year. Oops, I said crazy again. I mean,
Strike two, Larry. One
I
of
know.
these days, I'm gonna get
I'm
that
going to
out
lose
of
my
you.
fake doctor of psychology shingle here if I don't look out. No, but you know what I mean. I mean,
Yeah,
when
I know what you
and
mean.
all and we're going to talk about Amanda, but all the years since and everything that Discovery has done for not just Sarek, but for that family has
Yeah.
layered on all these. Now, wait a minute. Wait, but that means it's like we looked at Jane Wyman and Jane Wyatt and not Jane Wyman. We looked at Jane Wyatt and Leonard Nimoy and Mark Leonard in a certain way for so long, even series and movies years later, that the Discovery totally shook up. That the dynamic, adding in Michael and looking at what Sarek had been dancing, and then watching Amanda, and then realizing, retconning it back onto Amanda, what she'd been the glue, kind of an emotional glue that the family might not have had, especially for Michael being another human voice on the planet, but even for Spock, when he was being, those logical Vulcans torturing him and, bullying him as a kid and being a half breed, which no one else Spock was unique. No one else
Yeah.
on the planet had ever had to deal with that before, apparently,
Yeah.
supposedly. Yeah.
I I will make the argument, and I don't know if this is a real big controversial statement, but when it comes to the Star Trek canon, and when it comes to Star Trek as a piece of media, or as a franchise, as a media franchise, the character of Spock is the most important character in canon, as well as in the franchise. And
Well, McCoy.
but I guess it is a little controversial statement that
I just had to say that. Oh, good.
when you look at the Kelvin timeline, the Prime timeline, when you look
Mhm.
at Discovery in the future, and you look at Next Generation, I don't think there's any characters that's had a more impact on the stories as well as
Right.
like in popularity. But if you look at what has made this character so unique, what makes him so special in the Star Trek universe, it is the way he can understand both humanity
Hmm.
and Vulcans, and it's how he can balance those two things, and that balance.
And then project that out to the situation of the moment.
Yes, yes, and
Mm.
be able to he does code switching well, thinking in terms of how a human would think, thinking in terms of how a Vulcan would think.
Is that the
Really,
definition of code switching? You might want to define that for everybody.
yeah, yeah. So code switching is when like when you're hanging out with your friends and you talk a certain way, and then when you're with your family, you talk another way and you think a different way. When you're in a professional situation, you talk and think a different way. This also happens culturally, and in fact, people who come from multiple cultural backgrounds tend to
Hmm.
do this better. They tend to be able to switch between these different ways better, and Spock does this very well, and I think the reason he does that is really because that special relationship he has with Amanda. Um, you could make the argument that if he was all Vulcan, he wouldn't he wouldn't need that special emotional support. But I don't know. I think it's the balance of the love and emotion he got from his mom, and probably the more Vulcan. Um, I don't even know what to call it. The Vulcanness that he got from his dad. Um,
Volcanity.
the Vulcanity, yeah. But I think you see this in the 2009 Star Trek film where Spock asks his dad, like, why did you marry a human mother? And at first he says it was logical, I was an ambassador, and then later he says, well, no, I loved her. And even there, I think Amanda's influence on the family and on Sarek was profound. His He was probably a very different ambassador because of his marriage to Amanda.
Hmm.
It's a shame we don't see more of her early on. I mean, we do with Discovery, and then we do see the continued evolution of the kind of mother she was with Michael Burnham.
Yes, yes. I just think it's a chicken and the egg thing, or which came first. The way Sarek had to be there, but then once they were a couple and went through the medical procedures to have Spock, and then but that happened. They got Michael. Michael and well, Sybok and Michael are both older than Spock, but and how they wound up, as a family unit. But the one child they had together that we know of, that maybe there were, maybe there were failures before, the attempted procedure to cross to hybrid to I started to say crossbreed, not so agricultural, but maybe there was an attempt before Spock. Just the way
Yeah.
watching, to Paul. Well, it was cloning. It wasn't just in vitro, but to Paul and Tripp's attempt was not their plan, and it was a clone. It wasn't an organic birth, even if it was in vitro, but or outside the womb. But anyway, I just it dawned on me. I wonder if anybody's made an attempt to say whether Sarek and Amanda had tried before Spock. Kind of like
Yeah.
Lore, kind of like Lore and B5 before Data.
Yeah.
Only totally different, but the same kind of thing.
Well, that's an interesting question, Larry. I never thought about
I
that.
never
And
thought about that until just now. But
no,
yeah.
me either. And I wonder if that's why we don't see as many half human, half Vulcans. Maybe it's actually quite difficult
Well,
for.
there's a quasi-canon thing because Gene was attached to it. The Inside Star Trek album from '76 that's been on CD and now it's out there and you can stumble into it. But the Mark Leonard interview where he does it, he's interviewed by Gene as Sarek, and it's Gene talking to Sarek in character,
Whoa.
and he talks about the and I pointed to this for years. It's like it's the most canon explanation of what happened. I think they've made some nibbled around the edges a little bit in the latter in Discovery and all that. But he talks about how it was longer than a Vulcan gestation is longer than 9 months a little bit, and so
Mm.
it was longer. But then the fetus was outside the womb, and they were like nursing it along,
Oh wow.
specially, and then inserted back into Amanda and came to term. But anyway, he was talking about what a delicate process it was.
Yeah.
And they don't get into whether it was like experimental or first of its kind, or well, it was our seventh try and we finally did it. I mean, they don't say that, but he just
Yeah.
gives you the impression that it was this highly technical, delicate thing. And I don't think, I could be wrong here, but for years and years and years, that's all you had. And I think maybe there was a little dancing around it in one of the later shows a little bit too. But that's the most, and it came from Gene, so it's like, well, okay, fine, we'll go with
Well,
this.
if we play that out,
But again, what it says to Amanda is she's willing to, I say put up with this, but she's willing to go through all these hoops for Sarek and for this future
well,
child. And had they even thought through what that was going to mean, the way it wound up playing out for Spock?
Karen said something here that I think is super relevant. Karen said Amanda had a very deep respect for Vulcans and the culture. She loved Spock very much, but tried to help him navigate being half and half. And I think that's another key here to Amanda is the profound respect that she has for Vulcan culture. We see it throughout. At no point does she say, I really hate being stuck on Vulcan. Like, can you?
Good thing.
We talk about Spock being bullied, and I really love that scene in 2009 Star Trek. Have a drink, folks. That's a Kelvin timeline reference. I think that's probably my second or
Which was just
third.
a redo of the originals of the yesteryear scene. But
I know, I know. What yesteryear is the best episode.
no, I'm saying it's good. It's like it's cemented yesteryear and animated, and it was
just like.
It was a prime slice of STO9, so it was
Yeah,
okay.
just like Nemesis being a little prime slice of Wrath of Khan in different moments. And around we go.
This was prime.
No, I'm saying Nemesis being the prime reshadow of Wrath of Khan. One of these days, we should do the Nemesis watch. We'll do that after the 2009 watch.
Nemesis watch. You made it sound like the Death Watch. We'll do the Nemesis watch.
I had a point. What was my point? Oh, yeah. We see Spock being bullied in 2009, but we don't really see what it's like for Amanda to be the only human living on Vulcan. She's probably not the only one. There's probably a lot of Federation officers there. There's at least the
it'd be the reverse of T'Pol on Earth. There'd be a
Yes.
human compound.
Yeah.
There'd be
there's a human compound, which is probably the only place where you can go to a good party and have some fun on Vulcan. But she. It must have been hard for her.
She has the original speech in Journey to Babel, where she tells Spock how hard it was to be a mom and watch him be bullied and made fun of. She said, I think, make fun of you, which it didn't get to like physical bullying, but she was probably mommifying it down a little bit. But she does talk about the pain for herself watching it for him and knowing that Sarek had wanted her to be, let him be Vulcan, let him be Vulcan, let him be Vulcan. Don't embarrass him in front of the other kids. Don't go up and smooch him.
Yeah. I haven't come across this, but Charlotte says, highly recommend the book Sarek. By the way, if you haven't read it, it focuses, of course, more on Spock and Sarek's relationship, but at the heart of it is Spock's anger at Sarek for not being by Amanda's side when she died. I have not read that. I don't know that story, but thank you, Charlotte, for recommending that.
Between the Gaps novel, obviously, because Perrin just shows up in the third season of Next Gen, and we got no backstory about when she died, when Amanda died, and how he took another human wife and how they found each other. But we had Jean Laura as a guest on, and I had really never talked to her before. She'd been a fan author and then wound up doing pro books. And her fascination back in the old original fanzine, we had her as a guest on the Trek Files, and you can still go back and read her original works, but her focus was totally Sarek and Amanda. She was fascinated by the couple there, and then she wrote the Vulcan Academy Murders and some other, probably not always happy with them because they probably had to be edited to pieces, but her original thing was this, and that she would be a good one to talk to about this, or you can go back and listen to her talk about it on our shows on the Trek Files. But this is a subject that has already attracted and magnetized people over the years. When everybody else is running around doing Kirk, Spock, Scotty adventure stories, a chunk of the fandom that was attracted to those wrinkles, and that's why Sarek and Amanda were only in one. Sarek we think of, but both of them were only in the one episode of the original series. It's not like they were in 4 or 5. And then to be one of the only recurring character brought back for the movies, because people realized the performances and the gravitas and what it meant. And when you had it was a much simpler universe, one of the first things that stood out beyond the original 8 was Sarek and Amanda. And
yeah, Zahir has got a great point here too. What strikes me about Amanda is the sacrifices she made, living on Vulcan, adopting their emotional practices, coaching Spock to be the best Vulcan he can be, and the physical sacrifices of bearing a Vulcan child, which we get just little.
Mother, how could you have lived so long on Vulcan, known what it was to be a Vulcan, and not? I can't do the whole speech, but I can hear Spock looking at her when he's pissed off at her in Babel.
Yeah.
Oh, grab her hand. Oh, your father.
And again, I'm bringing it back to 2009. but Spock talking about, would you think less of me if I went through Kolinar and kind of purged all
Hmm.
emotions? And she's like, no, Spock, like I love you. I support you 100%. I mean, this.
Except that. No,
Yeah, right. Um,
the line
I'll
is
talk about
far.
this in the counselor's log, but I'm gonna do a little bit deeper dive into like that moment and all of those moments between Spock and Amanda and why I think it's just one of the best examples of being a parent. And yeah, she's lovely. As Libby says, Spock is a mama's boy, and rightfully so. Amanda obviously loves him so much. She's a Vulcan Moogie. That would be an interesting meetup. Moogie and Amanda and Loxana Troy.
I says that's high praise from Libby.
Oh yeah,
Like,
oh yeah,
yeah.
and those are some heavy hitters. Those are
Hmm.
some big time Star Trek moms right there. That's a great
Well,
comment.
do you want to move along?
Yeah, we can move along. Let me just make sure I get to these last few comments here. Um, Charlotte says, "I love the importance Amanda plays at the end of Star Trek 4. At the end, when when Spock tells Sarek at the end that tell his mother he feels fine,
Fine.
and that's a little reference going
Hmm.
back to the very beginning of that movie, right? How do you
How do you
feel?
feel?
How, how do you feel?
I feel fine. Whoa, that was horrible. Even worse than usual. Sorry about that, guys.
It's all good. You got to warm up the pipes,
Feel
Larry. You got to warm
fine.
up with something.
Talk about ways
Um,
of
okay,
mine.
so Scott's our transition here. Scott says anything Luoxana wears and says is his favorite lesson from Star Trek. So this
Yeah.
is our other, probably
Mega Mom, I'm gonna say Mega Mom. Yeah.
the second big M squared mega mom here of Star Trek. So let's talk about Luoxana.
Okay. Well, I had a picture too of her.
This image, Larry?
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just put it together because it's like remember that she was twice a mother at least. Um yeah, and there's no joint picture. This is her remembering in her memory. They're in their little weird memory moment here.
Actually, let me
The
make it
Betazoid
much bigger.
equivalent of Vulcan weirdness. But that's baby. This is from Dark Page, late in the season, late in the series, seventh season, and that's baby. She's remembering baby Deanna there with her as Deanna's watching on on the day of Kestra, her older sister there, Deanna's older sister, the day that she eventually drowns at the lake on vacation.
Hmm.
And Deanna was so small that they keep her from her until the emotional toll comes back and hits Loaxana years later, obviously, or 30 something years later. Um, and then she has a breakdown, and then Deanna helps her heal from it. So, there's the mother. But the thing about Loaxana is that she was. I started to make this almost my K3, but then I realized we talked about this earlier. Um, but Loaxana was conceived as something for Majel to do on the new Star Trek. And they were sitting around. I'm sure she and Gene are sitting around, BSing as this has all come along. And I'm sure I'm sure Majel is like, oh, I don't know, she could be just be yourself. Like, let's just make her be you, kind of a thing, bigger than life. And the old catchphrase was the Annie Mame of the galaxy. Oh, she'll be the Annie Mame of the galaxy. And it was such a great fit. To the first time you see her, she's tromping in, and like her daughter's mortified and embarrassed, and she comes in and she's flirting with all the captain and the mother. Would you
Yeah,
please?
I'm the daughter of the fifth house, holder of the sacred chalice of Rix, heir to the holy rings of Beta
Rings
Zed.
of Beta Zed, yes,
Yes.
which you can buy anytime there at the Experience in Vegas.
Oh,
Big stack of holy rings of Beta Zed.
rest in
Um,
peace,
yeah,
experience.
for all of them, Majel and the onion
Yeah.
rings. Um, but that was the original impetus for it, and it worked. It worked great, and heaven knows that early next gen needed some humor. Well, all of next gen needed some humor, and that was and it was a little awkward at first, but they hit the stride very often. And in that earlier K3, I talked about how in real life, Majel Marina was over here as a one-off on our episode about Chosen Families, about how Marina was here all alone. She was almost about to go. She stayed here to get a job. She was packing to go home when she got the casting, and she got hired to be Deanna. But she was a Brit here all alone, and and they kind of took her in, and she really bonded with early on with Majel, and it was nice, Jean and Majel, but she and her really bonded, and that's why I think of all the original cast, when Majel did finally pass, she was the one that, if you saw news clips at the time, she was the one that was really, really emotionally upset about it, because she had been kind of a mother to her on the meta side. So that's a mini K3 there, but Loxana was also allowed to go way beyond that. You want her as a mother involved, especially to this point, this really dramatic point, and then even beyond. And people talk about the moments on DS9 with Odo, and that again started off as a joke.
Yes.
They're like, oh, they were looking for characters to bring over to help launch, not full time, but like Gowron, or like the Duras sisters, and Will Riker, and some of those are in Q. And who can we help establish launch DS9 in the early days?
Picard never punched me.
And from the get-go, they were saying, "Oh, Loxana and Odo can have a thing," and and they had the dialogue moment where she says, and Odo says, "But could you be with a shapeshifter?" And she says, "I can swim." So I mean, it was like a joke line to begin that even, but then you wind up with that poignant line where he lets her, she lets him go to the goo, and she holds him in her dress until he can reform. And
it's a beautiful moment.
It was just a wonderful arc that we talk about everybody, Worf's arc and Quark's arc and everybody else's arc, but my God, Loxana to start with a punchline and become what she did, even as Majel herself was getting older. And,
I love Loxana. As a kid, I didn't get her. I just did not. I was like, oh no, Loxana episode. I felt very much like Deanna did whenever Loxana showed up. Like, oh no, she's here. But as I feel
your pain.
As I grew up, I really began to see Loxana in a new light, and I'll make this similar argument as I made with Spock, both in canon and out of canon. She might be one of the most important mothers in Star Trek, not only for the amount of development that this mother gets, and I'm going to talk about some of the big take-home points, but then the role she plays in the franchise. Obviously. The role she plays in the Royal Star Trek Roddenberry family, being the voice of the computers. No,
wait, are you talking about Loxana or are you talking about Majel?
I'm talking about Majel and Loxana.
Okay.
The actor behind the character and the character behind the actor.
Because Loxana was never the voice of the computer. I'm just...
No, I know, yeah, I better not make that mistake there. Majel and Loxana are probably the most important mothers that we've seen here. And if you haven't seen Roddenberry's documentary,
Trek Nation,
Trek Nation, you get a little bit of an understanding of his relationship to his mother before she passed, and I really love that documentary. Anyways, what I wanted to say about Loxana, I think there's a great comment. Let me see if I can. Hopefully, I can. Dig it over here. It's coming, Larry. Here it is. Charlotte says, Loxana reminds us that moms have sex too. Hashtag sorry. But
not sorry.
And
yeah.
Charlotte, I think that's kind of what I really like about Loxana is she's been through a lot. Her husband died when Deanna was about 7 years old. Mm-hmm. She also lost another child. And she is a single parent. She has been a single parent. And look, she's quite, this is weird saying it, but she's quite wealthy, obviously, given her title. At least she has a lot of status, and she has this private butler person.
She's been an off and on ambassador. Whether she's any good as an ambassador or not, she's got the clout to, write the letter and go, okay, fine, make her ambassador to the equivalent of Belgium. Or something.
She's got status.
Monaco, yeah.
She's definitely got status. and at the same time, she's been a single parent, and I think her story shows um, a lot of the difficulty of being a single parent. We know for Deanna, anytime she's Luoxana's pursuing another relationship, it's very stressful for her. That happens in real life. Being a single parent introduces a lot of complexities for, especially for single mothers who are
I was
raising their
gonna
children
say.
alone. Yeah,
Yeah.
we see that with Luoxana, but we also see someone who is still pursuing her career, someone who still has a very active sex life, someone who has not given up on who she wants to be, and I think that story is really amazing. Going to going Majel played not only Luoxana but number one early on,
Hmm.
and has been these really pioneering roles. I mean, the kind of character that Luoxana played in that time period in the early 80s and or in the late 80s and early 90s, you didn't see that many characters like that. So I love Luoxana, and I think she's
Hmm.
a fantastic mother that explores a lot of different things that we don't usually see with moms.
Yeah, I mean, I was. It's been a long time. I can never remember the title anymore of the Timothy show. But the time when Half a Life came out, Half a Life is the one with Dr. Timothy and from the culture from the Logan's Run culture where they have to go out. They don't die at 30, but they get to 60 or 65 and they're
Right,
expected to just go away and be put under for the good of the society.
right,
Right when he's about to save them. And she's fallen in with this guy, and
yeah,
they really, it doesn't last beyond the episode. But she's trying to convince his daughter to let him live, and then she comes around to it. But that episode started off a little wacky, but that was the time when I was like, holy cow, they're gonna like this. The series was becoming more mature. It was a fourth season show, and they're like, holy cow, they're gonna let Waxana be serious and
yeah,
sympathetic. And
yeah.
wow, look at Majel go. You're thinking, oh, Majel's, not a heavyweight actress. She's not good. But they carry it off. She and David Ogden Stiers, and it's like, wow, Winchester, look at you and Nurse Chapel go here. I mean, it
I
was like,
that's one of the
and then
things that I
and then
love.
on beyond everything they did with it after that, and then Dark
Yeah,
Page
yeah.
even by after that, and
Um,
they have fun with it. She and Alexander have that moment, and, the mud baths moment is a lot of fun.
oh, the
Big wedding,
higher, the
you
fewer.
why is that not a pin and a bumper sticker and a hashtag? I don't know. We should bring back the higher the fewer, but yeah, cost of living. I've come, yeah, and then much less all that she does the crazy stuff on DS9, the
Hey,
wacky
that's
stuff.
strike three.
Uh,
Crazy strike three. No,
no,
I'm
no,
kidding.
I said crazy wacky. I put the modifier. It's like, um, but the wacky stuff she does on DS9, but then getting into the Odo scene,
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Larry, I mean, what Majel is when given the material, boy, did she bring it. And we saw that in that
Well,
episode as
she got
well.
a new gown every episode.
The
One-offs, like
budget.
a reading dress. It's like
The
she
budget
wore
for her
that.
wardrobe.
Yeah.
I think Zahir is summarizing it pretty nicely when he says, Luoxana Troy, be true to your values even if others hate you for it. And we talked about Amanda and just how hard it must have been for her to be one of the only humans on Vulcan. I mean, talk about courage. Luoxana, she has no qualms about being honest about who she is and being authentically who she is, even if it drives Picard and Riker and Deanna, even if it makes them,
Hmm.
stressed when they appear.
Yeah. I was gonna say, be careful. What was that? His line there about what Zaire just said. I think about be true to your values, even if everybody wants to, like, eye roll you to death for it.
Right,
That's
right, right. I love the moment where Picard is confessing his love to her when she's being held by that Ferengi.
how many less memes would we have if it was?
I know the yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But when he starts, they're having so much fun, the actors, because Picard's like, "Oh, you want me to do Shakespeare? get ready. And Luang Sada or Meishal is just like, oh, it's such a lovely moment. I mean,
And
what a wonderful,
they were doing it all for the benefit of the Ferengi.
yes,
So
yes.
there's a transition if you want to transition.
Oh, Larry, look at you. What a great
Not
assist
that we
we
haven't
have.
had a million of them from Libby and others here today. Yeah.
Let's move forward to Deep Space Nine and one of the other. Let me actually make this really big. Give her the credit she deserves. Let's talk about Moogie.
Now, can I
What's
just say, everybody always says Moogie, and they love Max's. Everybody.
Moogie?
But I just want to remind everybody, her name was Ishka. Say it.
I was just about to say,
Say
she
her
has a
name.
name. She has an identity outside of being a Moogie, and that's
Yes.
Ishka. Larry, talk about an arc. I mean, she changes. She completely changes Ferengi culture.
Oh, she completely changed. Yeah, well, she was Andrea Martin at first, and then she was, oh my God, I've gone blank on her name. Died sad. Anyway, Jim Beaver's wife. Don Adams, Cicely Adams. Yes, Don Adams' daughter from Get
So
Smart.
um there's a lot that we can talk about with Ishka.
Hmm.
She clearly has a very affectionate relationship with Rom. Um, Quark and
Yeah,
her,
the original family triangle is where we start with
right,
Ishka. Yeah.
right, and her relationship with Quark, they're just too similar. They both are so similar, and they've got that very much. I see this with my daughter and my wife. Um, they're just so
Okay. I
similar.
won't tell anybody. If you lean in close enough, we won't tell.
Don't tell anyone. But I see this with my daughter and wife. They have the same temperament, same interests, and they're both sometimes so in sync with each other, and then sometimes they're just at each other's throats because they're so similar. It's like I love you both because you both are so similar in this way, and sometimes boy is it stressful. But that's the thing with Quark and Ishka. They're so similar, and so not only do we have that family dynamic, but Larry, the thing about Ishka, someone said it here just a moment ago. Charlotte says Ishka's a feminist, and so this idea of feminism is so much about equal opportunity. Equal, if you believe that all gender should have equal opportunity, you're a feminist. That's
Mhm.
simply what it means. And there's very consistent research that if you want to improve the economy of a country, make sure that women have the same access to the workforce, to education, to healthcare, to childcare, and to parental leave. If you can do these things, then you empower women to be a part of the workforce. And it's been a very consistent history of this. The GDP of a country rises up.
Mhm.
Maternal deaths go down. Childhood deaths go down. Like almost by every metric, by empowering women, we improve the mental health, the physical health, and the economies of different countries. And that's one of Ishka's legacies here in Star Trek. She shows us this that, like, hey, maybe it's not such a good idea keeping Ferengi women naked so that they can't really go out or do anything or participate in
Mhm.
society and aren't allowed to have bank accounts or businesses. If we kind of empower women, maybe we could all be making a lot more money.
I was gonna say, wouldn't we like double the consumer base and the maker base and yeah, and everything?
And,
Well,
and
here's on a very yes. So on the epic side, the more and more you saw Ishka, and it grew beyond just the family triangle. Then you bring in Zek, and then she's affecting Ferengi culture. But just think what it took for her. I mean, Keldar is Quark and Rom's father, who gets like one mention, but they talk about their dad being like not the best Ferengi, and obviously, and he's gone for whatever reason. I think he's
Right.
passed. She
Right.
didn't. There wasn't a divorce the way there was with Rom and Prinadella, but Prinadora. But think what it. But when Quark goes to visit her, okay, so she's a female. I think of Grilka on Kronos, right? And when Grilka's husband dies, she has to fight to retain her rights, even on Kronos, right? Right, the House of Quark, and Quark
Yes.
goes to argue
Yes.
for her. Okay,
Yes.
I've
Great
not
episode.
never thought about this, guys. This is like twice now. I've never thought about this before, but I'm trying to compare. Uh, uh, um, I just said Grilka and Ishka. Think about this, because her husband has died or whatever. But when we see when Quark goes to visit her, they have a nice house. I don't know how palatial it is on Ferengi standards. It was dry. There were no leaks, so apparently it was halfway decent. But you know what I'm saying?
It was dry. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Your concern on
No, you're right. It's always rated.
She had good roofers, but my point here is when he goes to visit her, it's a nice house. She's retained whatever the deal is on Ferenginar for women not having any power. She's retained her stuff even after Keldar's passed. I had never thought about this until this moment, and it's very comfortable. So yeah, if she has to go out in public, she goes. I forget what her public's. How soon we found out about her feminism. But I mean, just as a character, she was up there. She was not a submissive passive, just like Pell. Remember the female passing as a male, trying to pull that off because she was pissed at the society.
Right.
I don't know what Ishka did out. She probably says it somewhere. Like in her house, she can do clothes, but and they're like, "Oh, mom, come on, picture." But the idea that somewhere to the outside world has to know that her husband's died or whatever. Like the outside world has to know.
Well,
I'm sure
Charlotte
FCA knows.
Charlotte does say that Quark sends her a stipend.
Okay. But does she owe all of that to Quark's stipend? See what I'm saying?
Probably not, because as Charlotte then says, she also has her investing.
And maybe she was really unique the way Amanda was unique on Vulcan, among Vulcans. Maybe she was unique among her people. It's like, I'm sorry, if you're going to be a guest star, much less related to a regular on Star Trek, you've got to be like a pioneer in your culture. Like the outcast, or the outcast who secretly gets along, or the gets along person who is secretly an outcast. I mean, you've got to have something distinctive and not just be out there with the great flock of everybody else from your planet. Which becomes more and more obvious as we get along with Ishka. But it's also like, if Ishka's that much of a rebel, the more Quark is trying. Rom just takes it and runs with it, and he's like, "Oh, I'm like my dad." I'm like, I try to be a good Ferengi, and something about it. But here's Quark, who doesn't do a bad job of being a Ferengi until until he just says, "I'm not going to sell the weapons."
Yeah.
And not back to normal. I forget
Libby says, Rom does say Mother has acquired a lot of things, as if Quark's stipend wouldn't buy it all. So she.
In a minute, yeah.
Well,
but you get my main point here.
Oh, I totally get your point. Yeah, and I think it's pretty clear.
Ishka, even among her own people, beyond just the family dynamic, and that really kind of gives you read between the lines. And I'm sure Ira laid this all in without telling you in the beginning. Damar started off with one line, "Heading, sir," or whatever. "Aye, sir," and then winds up with that. I mean, Ira was great about taking. You saw a character for a moment or a given thing, and okay, that's their thing, and that's their box.
Yeah.
And before you know it, DS9 lets everybody have, 15 episodes.
Oh, well, and not only 15 episodes, but go in directions that you would never possibly imagine. I mean, it's pretty clear that
Deck? What?
Quark and Rom's dad, whatever financial success he had, was really much more because of Ishka. That their father kind of had the lobes of Rom, like not really a good at business. He probably had his own expertise, like Rom. Rom is not only a great mechanic and engineer and inventor, as we see with those the self-replicating mines later on. He has his expertise, but they're not business. And Quark and Ishka are really the financial lobes of the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ishka just refreshing on Keldar. I was doing this on the run, and the point there was that Keldar would not. He was trying to be traditional, and he had his male pride, and he would not take financial advice from Ishka, which is
Yeah.
what Rom is saying was,
Yeah,
Quark's
if
praising
we
their dad and knocking their mom, and Rom is praising their mom and knocking their dad.
if we if I were to do a want to be Ali K3 factor here, the Ferengi were originally conceived as being this very um
Are you going to steal my K3 from when we do the Ferengi episode? No, go
maybe, I don't know.
go ahead. Go ahead.
But the Ferengi were supposed to be the big villains of the Next Generation, and they were supposed to be a very a big reflection of capitalism and the worst aspects of capitalism, the gross, nefarious capitalism gone wild
Think when
aspects.
it was conceived, it was 86. It was the Reagan decade, the me decade, the
Yeah,
Gordon Gekko, right?
the Wall Street
Right.
yes, yeah, that
Wall
was
Street movie. Yeah.
yes, it was
Greed is
that
good.
era.
Hmm.
And the Ferengi as villains didn't really take off in TNG the way that was anticipated, and we got the Borg instead. So it worked out. But then we do see the Ferengi developed so much more in DS9, and we're going to talk about that probably next week. But Mugi Ishka, she represents so much of the horrible way women have been treated in so many societies and continue to be treated. And
Yes.
her arc is so much about, hey, folks, like, here's what is possible and what happens when we have real equity here, and if we do empower everyone equally in society. And it's an arc. You're totally right, Larry. It's an arc that you never expect. Like the Dukat arc, or the Damar arc, or the Kai Wynn arc. I mean, there's DS9 goes in so many directions. The Ishka arc you would never have expected. So I'm going to do the annoying thing that I'm doing this episode. While Spock was the most important character in Star Trek, and Loxana and Majel were the most important mothers in Star Trek, I'm going to say Ishka had the greatest influence on a society of all the moms we're going to talk about. She completely changed Ferengi society. And I hope we get to revisit it in Star Trek
That's the
Picard.
thing. That all happened late in series, so we really
Yeah.
got to follow. Yeah.
Like, how is that played out now? Like, Quark is mentioned in Star Trek Picard, but we don't see the Ferengi
yeah.
society, and we haven't seen a single Ferengi in the future era of Discovery. We haven't.
Right.
I think maybe we've seen a
We
Ferengi.
got a branch of Quarks on Free Cloud.
Yes.
Right. You saw the
Yeah,
neon
and that's
sign,
it.
but it was a visual joke, but yeah.
You see, there's one Ferengi in Lower Decks, I think, but it's much more of a stereotypical Ferengi.
Well,
I'd love to.
it was a good character, but they played with the audience, making it a joke stereotype until
Right.
it's like, haha.
Right. Oh, yeah, right.
It was a
right.
setup for Boimler, yeah.
Yeah. So I really want to see. I want to see Ishka's legacy, and I want to see how she changed society and how things are different now.
Yes, yeah. Well, put that on the list. There's
Yeah.
a lot of steps, right?
Make
We
it
can't all be
happen,
Picard 900
Paramount.
years in the future, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, we have a lot going on in the chat, and we have a lot of moms and some unique ones, and I sent you some images too, but I don't know, where do we want to go from here? Just go on.
Just one more comment from Christiana, who says Ferengi society seems to be on a better trajectory than ours. I mean, Larry, that was a lot of change in a very short amount of time that happened.
But you know what? You could look at, I mean, I don't know, maybe Libby knows this. I haven't, I don't know. I'm going to quit coming to these shows if I have to start like thinking on my feet, because things are just appearing to me right now as we think. But it really makes you wonder now, because there had been a time or two when I went, okay, was that just like cheap, easy writing? The fact that Ishka comes in and she brings it to Zek and revolutionizes Ferengi society, but then Zek's gone within a year or two, and he's turned it over to Rom. Oh, I'm sure Lita's going to let that all fall. No, absolutely not. It's in good hands as far as the progression, the revolution in society. But maybe it's a thing of, maybe you'd almost say the same thing about the Cardassians, that Ferengi society had been like stretched one way so far that maybe it had started to stagnate.
Mm,
And maybe, I mean, we don't know a big deal here. They seem pretty secure and stable and status quo, and that they've been around for a long time. You know, they've been this way for a long, long, long time. It's like sometimes they make fun of, Klingons and humans even for being the babies on the block sometime. Um, but maybe they were maybe they were starting to decay a little, rot a little, and maybe they were ripe for some freshening, and that's why it fell so fast.
yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know.
I just wanted to mention.
I say fell, switched, changed.
I just wanted to mention. I know I talked a little bit about some of the different priorities we need to make to like truly empower all genders here, and I think the Enterprise D is an interesting example. And someone, Larry, we knew this was going to happen.
Yeah. Did you see
Someone,
it?
yeah, someone did mention the Enterprise as being the great mother of Star Trek. I'll have to dig up the comment here, but if we look at the Enterprise D, the model of having families on board, if we really deconstruct that a little bit and really unpack it, I should say. And we look at someone like Beverly Crusher, who I think is an amazing mother in Star Trek. Having
And
Wesley.
what you're about to say was entirely Gene's intent in 1986.
Oh, I did
But go
not.
ahead.
I
Go
did not
ahead.
know that. Yeah.
Many,
So, where we are in 21st century, a lot, especially, and I'm going to speak mostly to America, but I think this applies to many parts of the world. Mothers are still expected to do most of the parenting. They're expected to take the big brunt of the childcare, of raising of children, and we don't really have good access to childcare. We don't have equity in healthcare. Women often make most career sacrifices in supporting their families. So a lot of that stuff needs to change, and we need to have good quality healthcare available to everyone and good quality education and childcare. Right, that will go a long way to changing these things. And when we get to our Father's Day episode, I can talk about all the ways in which this has been bad for fathers as well. But the Enterprise D, having families on board, having universal healthcare here in Starfleet, and it seems like the Federation, and also having childcare on board, which we see with throughout Star Trek: The Next Generation. I think it allows for people like Beverly to be the chief medical officer on the Enterprise and still be an amazing mom and not have to make any career compromises. We see this with so many moms. Sylvia LaForge, Geordie's mom. We see this with
that's why I sent you. I gave
yeah,
you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. She's a
I mean,
captain.
she's a captain. I mean, it's a
Yeah,
one-off. And when I saw Lower Decks, and the only thing I didn't pull an image from was Lower Decks because everybody would immediately. I mean, beyond Carol Freeman, Captain Freeman, I didn't know. With Mariner, I didn't know immediately what. I'm sure we could pull another one out, but the dynamic of that always to me goes back to Sylvia LaForge, um, because it's the whole dynamic is in Lower Decks. You realize that at the end, everything is a cute reveal and a twist there. But what you come away with is she's captain of this ship. Her husband's an admiral. They're obviously
yeah,
not serving together, and they raised. And whatever you want to say about Mariner and her personality, where she's been. Part of it's some trauma she had, like we saw with the
yeah,
flashback on the. But it goes back to Little Forges. His dad is a exobiologist. He's in sciences.
yeah,
He's on a ship. His
yeah,
they're not separated. They're
yeah,
married.
yeah,
But my God, they've and he's an adult. Geordie's an adult, so it's not like they're ruining his childhood by being separated. So maybe together earlier in their service they served together. But they're distant now. But they're still a family unit. They're not estranged.
yeah,
But they're serving different careers in Starfleet, and both of those the LaForges go by one single marital name, and Freeman and her husband's last name I forget. But anyway, they're using different names. But whatever they're doing there, they're all still, they're not like, oh, my mom and dad separated. The traditional trope of why they're separated. And somehow the LaForges are all still a family, a mature family. That's what amazed me about that. And they've been on that path for many years because she's a captain. She's been on a command path, obviously, for so many years. And that's what amazed me about, even though it's just one off and it's just view screen scenes with Geordi in that episode that I think is it Force of Nature? Anyway, what does that say? Like all these mothers you're talking about, a lot of it is not on the nose. It's like we're backtracking and retconning. We're backing back from here's what we know about them. What does that mean? And you're doing a lot of that. And she's one where it's like, no, wait a minute, stop and think this is where you're going with this. And
absolutely, yeah. And if you break apart how that must have happened and what we see on the Enterprise D, we see a society that is really valuing providing quality childcare to children. We see that when Alexandra comes on board, and I know we haven't gotten into Worf's family and there's so many other moms we could get into. There's great comments in the discussion here, but if we just look at what we see on the Enterprise D, there's good childcare there. There's good education. Geordi got an amazing education, good enough to become the chief engineer on the flagship of the Enterprise, while his parents both pursued careers in Starfleet. And it's just amazing to me what the cultural implications are there, that this is a society that has really prioritized these things. Charlotte's got a great poignant comment right over here. The pandemic has hit mothers the worst in many ways. There's been a mass exodus of women from the workforce. With women are still expected to do the lion's share of child rearing and housework, and kids, of course, have to stay home during the pandemic. Many who've had to make a choice between their children and their careers because the American political and economic system provide no support for mothers. And Charlotte, I definitely
like the rest of the civilized world.
Well, I mean, there's definitely parts of Europe, or I should say, actually, most of the world has much better parental leave and maternity leave than the United States. There's, I was shocked by this when we had my daughter. How for a lot of employment you can file for disability, like your pregnancy is causing a disability, and you can use your disability days to get a couple of weeks maybe of paid time off. But the maternity leave and parental leave, more broadly defined, is still pretty inaccessible to most people in America. And then you take the implications right there. Boom, you've become a mom. Boom, you're going to have to make more sacrifices in your career. And now there are implications of that for decades and decades to come. Fathers are also not really supported in being there in the early days. And so we set up these expectations right from the get-go of inequity when it comes to child rearing. So we've got a long way to go to get to that Enterprise D world where there is really wonderful support for families. And Larry, you said that was Gene's intention of
the whole
that.
point. Well, in a broad sense, the whole thing about families on board, it was a Bob Justman idea. Like the whole thing of how do we make, and I say this over and over again, every challenge of every new Star Trek is how do we make it exactly the same, but totally different enough? and one of the things, it's like, it's not lean. And the Next Gen was totally a binary. It was black-white then. It was just, we had the one, and now we're going to make the new. It wasn't like, here's the fourth or fifth or sixth. And it was all about how do we distinguish ourselves? What do we keep? What do we make distinguished? And like, well, we're not going to lean on all of our original series tropes like science Vulcan and Romulans and Klingons as enemies and all those kind of, and the technology breakdown, the transporter can't break down. So let's invent a holodeck and have it break down. But at the same time, they're making Worf a Klingon to show that alliance and detente and still a pressure point. one of the things he wanted to do was they're always talking, Kirk's married to his ship. He can't be married to, that trope. And Gene wanted to say, 100 years after that, and especially in our own future, you should not have to choose between service and family.
Yeah.
And you can bring your family along. And that was the general broad stroke of it. You shouldn't have to, Starfleet shouldn't be filled with all these people who have given up having a family, having a marriage or whatever, or coupling, much less a family.
Yeah.
And so that's what we're going. So we're going to bring along the families, which means we're bringing along classrooms and teachers and pediatricians. I mean, however that all colors out, and that So you keep extending that logic out, and it's like, well, what's the understructure socially that lets that happen?
Yes.
Whether it's an officer married to a civilian, or their spouse is a civilian, or whether they're both officers, whatever, either way. And we saw it both ways.
Yeah, and then there's a discussion going on right now about Keiko and sort of the some of the problems there, that she does give up her career as a botanist to keep the family together as they move to DS9 for O'Brien's new role over there.
Right. Talk about moms and sacrifices and what they do. Yes.
Yeah, and she's quite unhappy because she can't pursue her own passion there. She attempts to be a teacher, but that's really not there. Well, and then there was her school's bombed. That doesn't help.
Yeah.
We see her eventually become a botanist again on Bajor and exploring that.
She finds a way to freelance it and do consulting and do trips and research and all that. But and you say, well, is that bad writing or conceptualizing? And I would say that DS9 was totally atypical. It wasn't 98% of the Boring Federation that's so boring it doesn't get its own show. Is what she had on the Enterprise, where she's single and she's pursuing her career, and she's a civilian. She's not an officer.
You're right.
She's a single person civilian on this ship. Which now that I stop to think about it, is like, oh, there were those people. But like if she's in sciences in uniform and she's single, that's not surprising. But she was a civilian and single,
right,
and on this ship for botany. So that's how much of a science capacity the D was. Just stop and think about that for a second. And then she and Miles meet on the ship and date, and et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, but when the family went to DS9, it was a complete. I mean, I'm sure they sat down and had conversations about it.
Yeah.
And good on her. Now we saw the tension later on, and and part of this was the practicality of she's a recurring star and they couldn't have her in every episode, so. How do we? Sometimes we just don't need her for the story. Sometimes we're running around with him in his quarters, and hey, where's your wife? Well, she's and sometimes it was almost a joke thing. Oh, she's gone off to see her. Her mom is sick on Earth, or her, and then it became the biology trips and so you at least saw her there, and then it feels like later on they were able to get her on there where it wasn't so strained. But what we take away from that, what we have to retcon into all that is, she gave up. She made some hard decisions. She retconned. I mean, she regretted a lot of it, maybe. Well, she obviously did. But then she found a path. And the O'Briens were still, they were together. And they had 2 kids. They had their second kid under the incredible surrogacy. That whole thing of the stress of parenting and not, a surrogate wasn't an idea to be a surrogate, to have a surrogate parent bring your kid to. I mean, that's a whole different dimension to her motherhood too.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings with how the character of Keiko was treated. On the one hand, I really like that we see a family who has made a difficult decision like this. Not every decision in a family is going to be equal. Sometimes you make a decision that might be better for one person's career or another person's career. When my family moved from New York to California, it was because of a job opportunity that my wife got, and it would bring us closer to our family. But it was really in service of her career. I had no clue what I was going to do. So families make those decisions.
And here you are.
And here I am, life support live. So I like that we see that kind of story, and I like that we see marital conflict, and I like that we see a mother who is trying to make it work under circumstances that are not the best. And I like that she eventually does get to be a botanist and pursue the scientific career that she's wanted to. And you see how much happier she is doing that. At the
All
same
through the
time,
like what personified troll characters and alien body takeovers.
oh my
And
gosh. And your daughter aging up 20 years living alone on a planet or whatever happened. Boy, that was sad.
and just think, Keiko is the other side of the coin of O'Brien must suffer. So
Right. Oh, totally, totally. Oh, my husband was imprisoned for 50 years mentally. Actually, it
yeah.
only happened for 15 minutes. But boy, there's going to be a lifetime of trauma I'm going to have to be supporting here, and then it's
Sorry.
never spoken about ever again.
Yeah, yeah. I'm ready. I'm helping. Well, that'll be me and the kids then, honey. You're on your own. I'm sorry. I'm gonna pack them up and go dig some in the ground on some planet somewhere.
Yeah, so
Be
I
you, Miles.
as Linda says here, I love how real Miles and Keiko's marriage was portrayed, and I think Scott has a real interesting point too. I sort of feel like a 24th century family wouldn't find it so difficult to make a career choice like Miles and Keiko did. It's not about income money, so wouldn't it ideally be about what makes us happier and what's more of an adventure we're all in for? Part of me loves their story, and part of me is like, I really wish Keiko got treated.
Well, what you're saying is you wish she wasn't sometimes the what 60s stand up the Shecky Green punchline of the wife joke.
Yes, there was a lot of that. There was very much a lot of that, and so I don't know. It's mixed. I think the legacy here on Keiko is mixed. Although I'm really glad
Wow.
where things do end up there. Um, Larry, should we let me highlight some of the
There are,
comments.
yeah, please do that. I'm way behind on the chat.
Yeah.
Everything I see is just is awesome. So
Yeah, let me highlight some of the comments and then we'll jump into the counselor's log. Phil says we need to remember Data's mother.
mhm.
That's a wonderful episode.
Juliana,
Christoph,
yes.
get ready for this one, Larry. This is great.
How about this one? Data's mother was an android, but she didn't know it. So she, in her head, well, the original Juliana.
Are you talking
So
about Star Trek Picard?
no, I'm talking about Data's
No,
mother.
I know. I'm kidding.
What do you, fuck art. No, Juliana Tainer or Juliana Sung, later Tainer, totally left her. They weren't her biological sons, but they totally fled the planet. Omicron Ceti 3, whatever it was. Not Omicron Ceti 3. Anyway, um, Omicron Theta. Anyway, they left the original Sung lab for the Silicon Avatars attack. They totally they left their guys, their kids behind. And Data had been the later version that she didn't think ought to be attempted after Lore blew up. Had to be disassembled or whatever. But she let him do it, and she was starting to bond with. But they had to flee them all. And she said later on, she felt here's a mother feeling guilty about leaving her newly created android son behind, but she did it and went on with her life. And then she and Noonien parted, and she gets remarried, and then she meets this android fully formed son of hers, and she it's been long enough that she can admit her guilt for leaving him, and she's doing all this having been an organic body that was then along the way put into an android body. But even when he did that after the fact, he brings along the guilt of the organic body, and it's just all these characters. The minute you stop and get out of the box of the 60-minute show, the 43-minute show, and think about what they did and how they're tragic or they're dramatic or they're heroic or whatever. But anyway, I'm sorry.
No. I love that. I love that, Larry. This is the beauty of this show. One little comment. We could build a whole episode around it. Christoph, this made me laugh internally because I couldn't laugh externally because Larry was talking when I saw this comment. Does the Borg Queen count as a mother? I think absolutely. In the same way that a queen bee counts. Libby says, I think if DS9 were filmed today, the Miles and Keiko relationship would be quite different.
Yeah.
And then I forget who said this, but someone mentioned where were Keiko's friends, and then Charlotte says, yeah, she needed friends. Where were Keiko's friends? I think that's my issue with Keiko. She's not a fully
Hmm.
actualized character outside of her relationship with Miles. I think that's my problem, is she
Hmm.
doesn't have the same agency.
It seems like, if nothing else, she should have had some kind of relationship with Jadzia, because Jadzia was the science officer. Couldn't they have at least talked?
Or Worf, who delivered her child,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah,
served
later on.
together.
Yes. Yeah.
I
Well,
could
Worf always like ran away from that as a trauma memory, I think, or something.
right.
Yeah.
But I could see Keiko and Worf hanging out, having some prune juice and the Replimat. Jared says, Rafi, sometimes the best thing you can do is stay
Yeah.
away. And so we see the other side of this is a
Hmm.
mother who has prioritized her career and given her own struggles, maybe hasn't been able to be present in the way she wants to. Rafi is a really great story. I hope we're going to get to see more of her.
Yeah. She was kind of the obvious mother that hit me out of. You were talking about Picard, but I sent you another one from Picard. What was it?
You sent me a Discovery too, which
Well,
we
and
had.
we haven't talked about Voyager, which is all feminism all the time, with Janeway and Seven and what was the one I sent? Oh, the one I sent you though. I was when I was pulling images, I was trying to think of the not obvious things. After Amanda and Loxana, I was trying to go for the. That's why I had Sylvia and not Sylvia. Why do I keep saying Sylvia? Um,
Meryl. Are we talking about B'Elanna?
yeah, Maral. Yeah,
Yeah,
Maral and B'Elanna.
yeah,
And we think about the drama of Barge of the Dead, and it was her dream and all that. But in the canon story, we know about Maral is here again. We had an interspecies marriage where she was Klingon and her dad was human Hispanic actually, and they split up early, and she grew up single. So her mom is a single mother with it's kind of like um, I don't know. It's like Amanda with Spock at home
yeah,
if Sarek is running around the galaxy ambassadorizing everywhere.
yeah.
So they're still together, but they weren't. And B'Elanna's got her issues, and maybe we see her start to resolve some of them with her dad anyway. But there's complexity there too.
There's a
And
lot of complexity. Yeah.
I always loved how we don't see it, but B'Elanna, if you think about it, this struck me really early on. B'Elanna is exactly the opposite of Kalar
Hmm.
with parents.
Right.
B'Elanna had a Klingon mother and a human father, and Kalar had a human mother and a Klingon father.
Right. Right.
Just for what it's worth. Yeah.
And Charlotte also reminds us that B'Elanna's motherhood is barely started at the end of
Yes.
Voyager, and I'm more intrigued by B'Elanna's mommy issues with Meryl. Yeah. So
Exactly
there's
where I got to, Charlotte, with that. I'm thinking, no,
yeah.
well, as a mom, well, we see future alternate morals and things, but
Well, and you start to see her think about what type of life do I want my daughter to have, and
you see
do I
her with,
want
yeah,
do I
with
want her to have the ridges or not,
you see her
and
with the
sort of
maternal
yeah,
early
yeah.
decision. Right, unbelievable.
Linda said, "LOL, Horta," which obviously a wonderful mother in Star Trek. Libby reminds us about Jake meeting the alternate universe
Talk,
version of
talk
his
about
mother.
leading a whole culture. She's the whole culture and looks out for the future. Yes.
Right. So Jake meeting the mirror universe
Yes.
version of his
His mother.
mother,
Yeah,
um,
Jennifer.
of
Yep.
Jennifer. Really great episode over there. Linda also says Worf's foster mother was pretty awesome. So
Helena.
was
Yeah.
Kalar. And then Victoria says, I love Bashir's mother, Umsha. Bashir spends the episode being very self-righteous and judgmental with his parents, understandably so, but she makes him see that it was done out of love for him, his genetic engineering. Her
Mhm.
"you don't know what it's like" monologue makes me cry every single time. She gives him a different viewpoint, which is sometimes a lot of mother characters do for children. That's a great. I forgot about
Mhm.
that monologue, Victoria. That's a wonderful moment. Going along with Voyager, Christiana says, in my headcanon, Janeway's a mom of Voyager, trying to get her kids home and protect them from danger.
That's
And
insane. Yeah.
especially with Seven, she is Seven's mom and commanding officer, but
Hmm.
she's the one who sort of raises 7.
She's the mom. She's the mom of the crew.
Yeah. Oh, and
Except,
here it
yeah,
was.
the whole maternal thing with the whole show is set up for that. But yeah,
Larry, I dug it up. It was Nathaniel. Is the 1701 D a kind of mother to various spacefaring entities? So Nathaniel said it, what we were expecting. Who's going to say the Enterprise is a mom? There we go.
well, I go back to the original series the same way. That's one of the things that came out of the '60s shows. Everybody said, well, the Enterprise is a character, and that's what they brought to the animated and to the movies and to, and so people would say in later years that maybe, and it feels like Discovery's kind of got back to this, the way it's such an, with the spore drive, it's like they all lean on it, but the fact that the ship is a character, and anyway.
And we'll get to hear the last word here. My favorite Star Trek mommy, Beverly Crusher. I feel like Dr. Crusher's skill as a single mother was undersold by the poppy character development the writers gave
Poopy.
Wesley. Poopy. Whoops.
Yes, it's an old technical writer's term, the poppy character development. We call this we call this the Flanders Field approach to writing.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
All the Europeans, yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for catching that, Larry. Thank you for
yeah. Sorry,
catching
I thought he deserved better too. Anyway,
that. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
so behind on the chat, but it's such awesome. Which today, between our lifers and the topic today, that's why I was trying to put a little bit of parameter around it, because we could go on with this all day. We literally could. Every episode has some angle coming or going of a mother to it, and the guest cast, and the the drama of the week and everything.
Actually, let me give Robin the last word here. Robin says, according to the books, Rafi's motherhood was full of struggles. The marriage was rocky, and the son-mother relationship suffered. But kudos to Rafi to continuing to try. So that's an interesting angle here too. We haven't talked about marital conflict, domestic violence, abuse, like those kind of things, and how that is so often targeted women, and how families might suffer as a result. I don't know to the degree to which Rafi struggled in those books in her relationship, but you can see how that would strain her relationship with her child, and then also how that might relate to substance use, which is I think so great that they feature that as part of her story. Mm-hmm. Larry, anything?
Squeeze one more in that I sent you an image for, because it'll represent Enterprise.
I'm bringing it. Yeah, of course. Of course.
At first, I'm thinking mothers in Enterprise, with aside from T'Pol, until it took you to the last season, but T'Pol's mother, T'Les, who has a tragic arc, and you find out she was like a radical. She's jumping on her a little bit for being on the Enterprise, and then turns around and she's a little secret homegrown radical there with the Serenites, and gets back to and dies. But spoiler alert. But and Joanna Cassidy, wow. But dies, trying to show her daughter. Anyways, you get it that you start off thinking she's a wet blanket Vulcan yelling at her daughter for being with humans on their ship, and, oh, Mom, don't be so reactionary. And then turns out she's a good reason of why you see T'Pol. Again, if you're going to get a role in Star Trek, you better not just be the milquetoast average Joe of your culture, or Jill. You better be a standout. And here you've got one of the first Vulcans who's going to go over and bravely, she's bravely, unwittingly going along with the humans and mixing in. And Soval is like a late convert to that. He's kind of with her, only behind her. But here's her mother kind of sowing the seed, a little bit like Ishka and the boys, kind of like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Charlotte says T'Pol's mom is pretty badass, which I completely agree. And getting back to Rafi, Scott says, as a sober alcoholic, I appreciate Rafi more than I can iterate. And like Barclay, I love Rafi because we see a character who struggles in such a human way that we struggle right now. Barclay represents so much of not only last week's episode, which was all Barkley, represents so much about anxiety, but also about like media use and how many of us would probably struggle with the holodeck in the same way we might struggle with TV and video games and all that sort of stuff. Rafi is a similar way that shows us why sometimes people struggle with substances, and a very human experience right over there. So,
And there was a lot of controversy around all of that, the character and her addiction and her struggles and all this. and I got where it was coming from, but again, I go back to hashtag texture, not trivia.
yes.
And I did a Tuesdays Live topic where the title was "You Can't Force Feed Utopia."
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like, just because that's there and available, you can't. What are you going to go in and force everybody to be perfect? I mean, as long as they're not harming others, there's only so much you can do, even in your perfect society. So anyway.
Well, let's open up the counselor's log. This is a part of the show where I do a little deeper dive into some of the psychology and mental health that we've talked about. And Larry, I want to talk about Amanda. I want to talk about this
Again.
No. It all goes back. Larry, I don't know if I've told you this, but I think Spock is the most important character of the Star Trek. No, I'm not going to go on my little rant. I actually want to talk about this concept called attachment. And attachment is this, it's often talked about in the context of love and how we attach to romantic partners. But attachment at its most basic element is about a parent and child. And it's really what happens when a child is in pain in some way and a parent is helping. The child is struggling and the parent is helping. That is attachment. Yes. And a lot of the early research on this was really done on animals and how soothing touch is, and how animals would, these rhesus monkeys would prefer a soft touch, even if it was from an inanimate, quote, mom, versus getting food and nurturing and sustenance. That's complicated stuff. I'm not going to get into that. But when a child is born, touch is so critical, the skin-to-skin contact. And a child crying and a parent coming to soothe them, to touch them, to quiet them, that's attachment. That's and what happens is, as a child continues to grow up and they come across new situations where they don't know what to do. When you have good, strong, secure attachment, the child looks back at the parent, oftentimes mom, and looks to see, is it okay for me to move forward? And if the mom looks calm and happy, and the child moves forward. If the mom doesn't, the child backs off. So attachment is the relationship through which kids learn how to explore, how to manage their difficult emotions, what to do in uncertain times. And as kids become teenagers, the challenge there is, how do you start to become your own person while staying attached to your parents? And as adult children, even then, when you are faced with very big decisions, when you've got good, strong attachment, you turn to your parents and you ask them for their advice. Now, not everyone has great attachment with their parents. We know that when parents have gone through trauma, and they might be struggling with anxiety or depression or postpartum depression, these kinds of things, it can make that early attachment really hard. Instead of hearing crying and wanting to help, mothers and fathers who have experienced trauma might hear the calming and sort of might hear the crying and get overwhelmed and not know how to soothe and not know how to help because they're dealing with their own stuff. So attachment can also not develop well, and then when it doesn't develop well, people tend to have a harder time dealing with their emotions and dealing with relationships and having stable relationships. The reason I'm mentioning all of this sort of stuff is in addition to trauma, economic, being economically deprived, not having a lot of community support. Mothers are expected nowadays to do everything with so much less. Like historically, communities raise children. it wasn't the responsibility of one person, but it was a larger social network, a larger community of people, of uncles and aunts and neighbors and these small tribes that helped raise kids. It wasn't all on
Yeah.
one person. So there's a lot of reasons why attachment can become a challenge. But the reason I mention all this stuff, you want to see good attachment? Look at Spock and Amanda.
Hmm.
Whenever Spock is going through a challenge, he doesn't know what to do. Mom, should I go through the process of Kolinar? Mom, I was just reborn on the planet Genesis. I don't. What should I do? How do I feel?
Feel. Yeah.
Whenever Spock was struggling emotionally, what did he do? He turned back to Amanda. And Amanda is such a representation of great attachment. Being there for Spock when he's going through such difficult situations. And I don't want to
Even
discount.
even before Jane Wyatt, even before they wrote a line of dialogue for Amanda, fourth show in, the famous breakdown scene in Naked Time, when they
Yeah.
needed. I mean, of course, we're looking backwards, so of course this is the way it grew. But when they're first sitting, when John D.F. Black and Gene are sitting there debating what to do here, and Dorothy, what to do here for what's Spock's breakdown in the Naked Time with the Psi 2000 virus? What does he go to? He's breaking down crying and saying, "I never told my mother I loved her." So,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's, think about, before we even knew Amanda or what her name was or what the thing would look like, we knew that about him. That was his end of the telescope, looking backwards at it.
And Amanda is one. You see Amanda touch Spock and embrace Spock in many different moments, and that aspect of touch is so critical. It was only I can't remember if this was the 90s or even later than that. But once we started to realize this stuff, premature children who have to be held in NICUs, in neonatal ICU units, we started touching them because we realized how important
Yeah.
touch is to early development, how much it soothes children, how much they need that. And these poor kids who were born premature were being deprived of touch. We've seen this in research on orphanages. Historically, kids who were in an orphanage were not touched. They didn't get that soothing. And this is something you see Amanda do to Spock: embrace him, love him, support him. I think it's one of the best demonstrations of attachment. Sarek does it in his own way. After Spock is bullied in 2009, he is there and he is supportive. But that touch, the emotional support, Spock turning to his mom in times of need, and then why her loss in 2009 is so traumatic for him. She is his main attachment figure. When it comes to being a mother and it comes to being a parent, Amanda's got it. And Amanda is a shining example of how much love, patience, kissing the boo-boos, being there, touching, embracing is so critical. And so I just wanted to highlight that because I think she is she's ultimate mom here we've got in Star Trek. And thank you, Amanda, for giving us Spock. Larry, that's what
Yeah.
I got. I am dying to hear what you got for us this week. I've seen the images. I have no idea what they mean. So take it away
Really?
for our K3
Okay,
factor.
okay. Because I came down to two, and then I realized one. I was going to talk about Majel and Marina as a meta to Loxana and Deanna, but I realized I had done that on our other one. So this one, I'm going to talk about and somebody that you may have been hearing a little bit about if you all are keeping track of what's going on in meta Trek world, and I've talked about it the last month or two again. And it's something I think is way overdue. Talk about a real life mother. Of course, K3 we're going to deep dive real Star Trek behind the scenes, kind of in an echo of our theme today. So it's kind of a counterpoint to Ollie's counselor's log here. But one of them, Star Trek is very it's the industry, very man or Gene and Gene Coon. Now Dorothy Fontana was there early on. It's kind of an early, a mother of Star. I was looking to see if anybody had the nickname of the mother of Star Trek. Majel was always called the First Lady because she was married to Gene, I guess. So that was kind of her title, for whatever it's worth. And I saw B. Joe Trimble sometimes, and even Shirley Mayuski from the Well Committee, I saw referred to as Grandma Trek or whatever. But nobody really had this title. But here's somebody I'm going to give it to, Jerry Taylor. She was only about the third. You had Dorothy, and then now this is an image. This a lot of you may have seen recently. This is I can't do the cursor. Anyway, the lady in the purple sweater. That's Jerry Taylor, who was a co-creator of Voyager, came to Next Generation in the 4th season. And then took over the show as Michael and Rick started working on DS9, and then helped co-create Voyager and by extension everything Janeway, and brought her Hoosier background to Janeway and all that. That's the Voyager documentary team. They got up to talk about. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about Jerry on Tuesday Live and about how she was one of the humble creators. When she retired, when she retired from Voyager, she retired from the industry and had a long career, but. And thought, you've heard everything you want to hear from me. Everything is old, had that thing. Not totally unconnected the idea of this whole generation of what I'll call Janeway's army, but the whole effect she had on little girls and young women as for Janeway and Voyager's maternalism, feminism and Seven and all of that. She helped create Seven too, and was there for the founding. But my point here is that Jerry Taylor. And I wish I had some photos to back this up, and if I'd had more prep, I could have got some. So I'm going to represent this aspect by. Do you see that 4 shot?
Yes.
There's a crop 4. So Jerry Taylor. That's her parents' name growing up, but she was and she kept it professionally. But for a long time, Jerry legal name was Jerry Enberg. She was the wife of Dick Enberg, who a lot of you who are sportsy wise will remember was a longtime NBC sports announcer. Especially football. I mean, he called Super Bowls. He had a great voice. I remember him doing the Orange Bowls all the years OU was going in the 80s. And anyway, she was married to Dick Enberg for many years and had 3 kids with him. And Alexander Enberg, who variously played Jack London and the 2 Icks. Sarek and Tuva, and then was even a mail-in engineer. That's her son, one of her sons. She had 2 sons and a daughter, one of them an actor. And you could say, oh, great, your mom's working on the show, you got him a role. Well, it's not like he took over. I mean, she looked out for him, but he did well. And especially on Voyager, we love that.
Yeah, he's wonderful.
And the Lower Decks episode, he was great in that too. So my point here is that she had kids. She was a mom raising kids. And when her divorce came, her husband was in sports broadcasting, had a foot in entertainment. She basically reinvented her life, at that point. She was going to wind up with the kids and went into writing. She had that, went into TV writing because she probably had some connections by then, but she had to prove it. And not only did she become a writer, she stepped up and wound up being a producer on several shows, came in, and then wound up learning directing craft and doing that, and wound up being called what they would call a triple threat, a writer, director, producer. But she did all this as a midlife pivot, right? In her 30s, and took it all up. So she wound up being, just real quick here, the show she was on the longest, 6 years, on Quincy with Jack Klugman, when he was a medical examiner detective, right? He solved murders and crimes as a medical. That was her main show. But she also had a year on Blue Thunder, which was a show. She did a year on Magnum. She had a year on In the Heat of the Night. Jake and the Fat Man. She was co-executive producer. And that's when she found her way to Star Trek and wrote a script and 4th season. And they loved her. And she fit in. And so many writers couldn't write in Gene's sandbox, but she found a way to do it, and then very quickly established herself, and then ran Next Gen the last year or so when Michael was working on DS9, and then, like I said, famously did Voyager. But she did all this. I mean, look at her. Alex is old enough to be playing those young roles in the latter years of her Next Gen days. She totally reinvented herself,
Yeah.
going from a mother, the mother of her own family, to pivoting around and then winding up. We always give Michael Piller, as we should, credit for bringing all these young writing talents in that he did. But it was Jerry that wound up kind of nurturing. And when I met her when I was doing my book, she would talk about the boys, and we've got a great shot. And it continued through Voyager. I gave you a writer's room picture there. Now they finally did have
Do you want me to do
Lisa.
the
Yeah,
TNG writers room
yeah.
or the
No, it's
the
the one where
Voyager?
they're actually in the writer's room. There's one where it's
Okay.
three guys the guys at the sink.
That one?
Yeah, do that one. So her
Okay.
first, the guys she called the boys, and I've used this picture before. Yeah. So here's a very young Ron Moore, Brandon Braga, Renee Shvaria, and Narain Shankar, who all have gone on, all very. But it was Jerry and the boys by about fifth, sixth season, and Michael going. Dad Michael was running around creating DS9, and she went from this to and then do the other one, and then on Voyager, where she launched and co-created and was there for 4 years, and Lisa Klink is there, but otherwise it's Brian Fuller and Brannon and Ken Biller. Oh, and I've just gone blank. He was an assistant for a while. Oh shoot! All I can think of is Richie. They called him Richie Cunningham because he had the all-American boy look. Someone's going to shoot me. He's going to shoot me. But wound up show running the American show Elementary, and he's got some other shows now. But he went from being an assistant to that's the path. But here she is mothering, not one but two writers' rooms. So
Mm.
hats off to Jerry. And now she's, her second husband that she was married to for years, David, passed away a couple years ago. And she's kind of coming out of her shell now about thinking she's done with Star Trek. Like, not that she's done with it. She's very proud of it. But it's like, no one wants to hear me. Well, they got her on film.
No, we kind of do.
Yeah, there's a whole generation that really wants to hear who was Janeway before Kate Mulgrew, you know,
Mm.
and who was Seven of Nine before Jerry Ryan to a lesser extent. But good on her. She's going to be on camera for that, and I think she's going to be on camera for the big 8-part documentary Center Seat coming. So helped get them fixed up to do that. So it's just she just didn't believe that anybody had any. It's like, I've said it all before. I've done all the interviews with you guys. What else do you need to know from me? It's like, well, people. It's like touching the phoenix. People want to see. People want to see do that. So anyway, on this Mother's Day, I want to say, hey, the mother that was a mother then pivoted and still supporting her kids. Alex has had some health issues, and she's still trying to support him from afar, how she can. But anyway, so she went from that to mothering all those writers and being a feminist influence on them. So good on Jerry, and yay that we're going to see her again, and she's going to be able to reclaim some of that. Not that she was denied it, but that she walked away from and come back in, and she gets it now. She gets it.
Victoria says, Larry, you're making an excellent case for Jerry Taylor being the mother of Star Trek. I would say one of the most important mothers of the TNG era of Star Trek might
Yeah.
be Jerry Taylor.
It's hard for me to overshadow Dorothy, but certainly, yes. Maybe co-mothers. I don't know. Yeah. Dorothy never had kids of her own. I mean, she, so if you're looking at that kind of a thing, but as far, and Dorothy mothered all that you were saying about Spock and Amanda, that started with Dorothy, by the way, Dorothy Fontana.
Let me. Oh, there you go. There's another connection there. Let's jump into the away mission. This is the part of the show where I give you some type of take-home message that you can start applying to your life. Well, I mean, tomorrow's Mother's Day, right? So I was thinking, what would be a mentally healthy way to think about Mother's Day and how to what you can do. And I realize some of you might not have a mother that's still living, and some of you do. And I've got things for everyone. So the first thing to really think about is what can you do that would actually reduce stress and not create new stress? So one of the things that we often do as gifts is we might get an experience for mom. Here's a day at the spa. But what we don't do is think about the other ways in which we might be actually creating stress for mom. If we have mom go out for a day and take care of herself, but we don't do any of the other things that mom has to do at or the responsibilities she is taking on, we're actually probably creating more stress because when mom comes back, she might have to do all those different things. So if you are getting your mom an experience or a day or anything like that, think of what can I also do to make sure I'm reducing responsibilities for her. I am reducing stress. I'm not creating more problems. And you know what? A great gift is also taking on some of that responsibility yourself. You don't have to spend the money on getting her a day at the spa, but if you can pick up a lot of the work around the home so that your mom can have much more time to herself to do whatever she wants to do, that's wonderful. So think about what's going to reduce stress. The second thing is try to solve some problems. So most moms tend to
Especially this
feel,
year.
yes, especially this year, most moms tend to think that they just have to do a lot more than fathers do when it comes to food, household responsibilities, managing all the kids' activities and schedules. So you in your role, how can you solve some of those problems that your mom has been in the business of doing herself? How can you take on a little bit more of the load there? Um, I think I didn't start to do my own laundry until I actually went off to college. But now that I think back to it, I wish that I started doing that earlier. That would have been such a great way to just reduce some of the literal load that my mom had to do. But little things like that can actually go a very long way. The very last thing I want to say is if you have no clue what to do for your mom, share gratitude, whether it is writing a letter and sending her the letter, whether it is telling her in person about a story that you're very grateful for, or if it is if your mom is no longer living, if she's passed, but expressing your gratitude for something your mom did for you to someone else. Gratitude is it's kind of like this super emotion where when you express gratitude, not only does it help you to feel better, it helps the person receiving it to feel better. It uplifts everyone who's around to hear that story, and it tends to persist for a long period of time. So if you've got no other gift to give, think about gratitude. Larry, one of the childhood memories that sticks out for me is I went to a water park over here when I was a little kid. My mom took me, and she didn't know how to swim, and so
Your who took you?
my mom, my
Okay, great story for today then.
yeah, I know, timely, right?
Yeah.
My mom and I went alone. We kind of recently moved, and I didn't really have any friends here. And I think my mom wanted me to have a fun day, and she took me to the water park, but she couldn't swim, so she spent the whole day sort of like sitting there and watching me and like moving around as I went to these different rides to make sure I was okay. But she spent like a whole day in the sun just making sure her kid was happy, and that I didn't really think about it when I was a kid, but when I think back to it as an adult, like, there was no cell phones, there was nothing like that. There was nothing to like keep her occupied or like have fun while she was doing that. She purely spent this whole day just to see her kid have fun, and I'm so grateful for that moment at a time when I felt so alone and isolated. It's sharing stories like that with your mom and why that means so much to you can go a long way in making her feel special and supported and loved. So those are my that's my away mission. Larry, let's just spend a few minutes in opening up those hailing
Yep.
frequencies and catching up on some of these comments here.
I have been trying to catch up. I'm an hour behind, but so much good stuff today from everybody. So many share. I mean, a lot of Star Trek moms, a lot of people telling their stories. Yeah, my mom passed away just about a year. My mom,
Mm.
her was the last 10, 15 years. It felt like I'd separated already. It's almost like she could have been Alzheimer's or something or whatever because she was so far north that the rest of the family in Oklahoma and me in California, we were trying to get her back, but her husband, her stepfather, they liked their isolation, and anyway, it was a tension point. I'll just say
Yeah.
that, and we were all good, but we were all like, "You're getting older." Nobody wanted to say, "When you get to be older, who's going to take care of you all up there?" And
Right.
they leaned and they had friends and all. That's all good, but anyway, we would talk about North Pole, Montana, kind of disparagingly, and no, and my older brother never. Not that they didn't want to, but it was like it was a hard deal to go to Montana from you had to fly in and then drive for an hour. And anyway, I was the only one that saw them up there at the last place. It was like they went from Oklahoma to Colorado to Wyoming to Montana. But anyway, she it was a blessing that she passed because she'd been having some respiratory issues and she was 90, so it was all good. But the last time I flew on a plane was to go to her Oklahoma. We had a funeral in both a memorial service in both places, and I went to both. I was the only one that went to both, could get away and do both. But the one in Oklahoma felt much more old family-ish, and the one of Montana was the last 15 years. But that was the last time I flew, was in October of 2019. So on one hand, it's been fairly recent, and then of course everything either stood still or took 20 years, one way or the other, during the pandemic feeling. But it's been fairly recent. But on the other hand, it was like a long drawn out process where we talked, but it was so it wasn't like she's gone and I really miss her and was in daily life, which I regret because my grandmother had been like right down the road from her mother's mother. One of my grandparents had been very close to them, and they lived a long time and all that. So life's life what it is. But I love my mom, and she was great my whole life. And I sitting here thinking as you talked, and I'll say this one thing because I want to really hit everybody else. I hadn't thought about this in a long time, but my mom and dad divorced when I was, and it was fairly civil, but it was a divorce when I was 18. The summer I graduated from high school, and my younger brother was 4 years behind me, and my older brother was 10 years older. And I knew there was trouble in for 2 or 3 years there'd been tension and all that, but so I saw that. And I didn't realize how later on, I think later on, she just wanted to get me through high school. I think I was her favorite. Not favorite, because my older brother was around for 10 years. But I think after he was out of the house and between the two youngers, and I think my little brother picked up on that a bit. But I know in hindsight, I know that she held off starting the formal divorce proceeding, whatever, until I was out of school, so it wouldn't like uproot my life the year before I graduated. And we're talking, a generation ago where people were more worried about all this kind of stuff. And I kind of just intrinsically realized that later on. And then I think I kind of intrinsically realized my little brother realized that too, because I think at least once he said, well, why didn't you wait 4 more years and let me get out of high school before uprooted my life? Because then he's going back and forth, spending time both ways and all that, which he also manipulated. Hi, Gary, if you're watching. But anyway, but so it's like, but she was just great and cooked, and people know I talk about her red velvet cake, and she was a great cook and all that stuff, but also had a professional life and yada yada. And we all love, I had a mostly good relationship with my mom, and there was some drama tension in later years because of choices, but that's all life, and that's texture, not trivia. So anyway, let's get back to
No, thanks for sharing that, Larry. There's been some really lovely comments that people have been sharing here. I love this story from Libby. I want to highlight this one. My mother went to my first convention with me. She just wanted to relax by the pool. She grew up in LA area and was talking to a gentleman in a chair next to her beside the pool. He had grown up in the same area as her mostly. He excused himself to swim laps, and that's when she realized she had been talking to George Takei.
Oh my.
Oh my. Oh my.
Oh my. I leaned on my mom for all I could never ask my dad for stuff, but I had like all these stamp collecting and model rockets and everything. And my mom didn't spoil me, but she got my stuff. But she's the one, before I had a license, she dropped me off for a day. My first, very small scale, my first con she took me to. So yeah, got me too.
I love it. I love moms who support their kids' love of Star Trek. Phil says, I'm 59. I lost my mother at 22 in 1985. Yeah. I didn't cry at Spock's death scene until after that experience. I think if you've lost someone you're very close to, that scene hits you differently than than otherwise. So thank you, Phil, for sharing that. We've got Linda says the best gift every mom appreciates is a heartfelt, handwritten note. When all else fails, not when all else fails, actually. Your first priority, like go for the authentic, emotional
Mm.
gratitude. Scott says, I would love to see A Strange New Worlds written by Jerry. She's fully retired now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Larry, she's not writing anything else. But yeah, I
Yeah,
would.
or collaborate somehow, or so. I don't know. That's who knows? We'll see what this little
Who knows?
renaissance. Who
Yeah,
knows? We'll see what happens.
yeah.
But I would too. Yeah.
Yeah. All I
Yes.
know is we are going to be seeing some strange new worlds and strange new worlds. Charlotte says, in all seriousness, if there was one silver lining of the pandemic, it's the way my relationship with my mom has grown. Not that we had a bad relationship, but now we have a regular weekly video call, and we've had lots of long overdue conversations and are learning a lot more about each other as fully developed people as a result. Charlotte, I'm so happy to hear that. I'm happy you're having that experience. Galinda's mom went ziplining for her 80th birthday, and she'll be 82 this year. That is amazing. I don't think I'll be going ziplining anytime soon, and I am not near 80.
That's like a little like Poppy Bush, first President Bush doing his parachute diving, and toward every 10 years, and the last one he did it with a partner, skydiver strapped to him, but still he did it. Yeah, that's awesome. Now he
Yeah.
wasn't a mother, obviously, but anyway, the idea. I wouldn't do it.
Oh man. Libby says where is it? Here it is. My mother's getting chocolate and bath stuff. Her favorite things. Always helpful to know uh,
Mm-hmm.
what their favorite things are. Heidi says you guys seem to have awesome moms. My mom saw a lot of Star Trek with me, and she actually loved Rom, because Rom loved his mom, and she saw that, and she's like, she loved every time he went Moogie. She loved Rom so much because of probably how much he loved his mom. And so that always sticks out. My mom went to go see Star Trek First Contact with me, and she thought the Borg Queen was so cool. And she loved Data. She really loved Data as a character. So my mom has always encouraged my love of Star Trek. She's wonderful.
Oh,
She's wonderful.
okay. Can I indulge one more? I've
Please.
told this more than once. Speaking about moms supporting your Star Trek, so it's Christmas, whatever, when the tech manual came out,
Hmm.
and we're at the mall, and I go, I'd heard about this. Oh, here it is, Mom. Here it is. She's like, here's something you get me for, and whatever it was $4.99, whatever it was, $5.99. It wasn't, on that era prices. And anyway, I go here. This is what I really want. This is what I really want. And she picks it up and she's flipping through it and she sees she didn't know Star Trek, but she could tell what it was, And she flipped through it and she's reading the front and she goes, And this is my mom that did stamp collecting for me and did model rockets and I mean, I don't want to say she didn't tell me no. I had to wait on a couple things for she would try to leverage stuff to get me to, like, if I had a bad habit, she'd say, why don't you work on your biting your fingernails and then we'll see about a tape recorder. But so it wasn't like she just threw stuff at me. But so we're standing there and I'm like, and she goes, I don't know, Larry, $5.95 for a book about something that doesn't really exist. and I just went, I don't know if I did it on the outside, but inside I'm like, how is this different than it was? So weird. So I had some Christmas money, and that spring break I spent some of my spring break with my older brother in his college town where he lived then, where I went to college later. And there was a little bitty tiny, I can't believe they had one, a little tiny bookstore at a little tiny renovated little mall, like strip mall thing. And I was in there and they had a copy of the tech manual, and I bought it with my own money and went along. And so, like, years later, after kind of life went the way it went, I started telling that story, and I've teased her, and she just, and she's mortified now that she. I have to be past tense now. But anyway, I used to tease her about that all the time. Yes, Mom, $4.95 for something that doesn't really exist.
Also known as
Yeah,
fiction.
she was always very supportive after that. She came with us when we moved. She was our third adult, like driving the van and the car to come out with. So yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, enough
Well,
of my
Larry, this has been really a lovely conversation, and I hope everyone has a good Mother's Day. And I know for some of you, Mother's Day might be more difficult, and you might also, your moms might not be around, or you have a complicated or not so great relationship with moms, and
you're part one way or the other of a very untraditional mom relationship.
Yes.
Hopefully for the good. I mean, in a good way, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And so as I song, Larry, it's that time of the show where we have to thank Scott and Jared for moderating Life Support Live, keeping this a safe place. Thank you, Jared, for everything you do in terms of cleaning up all of our episodes. And then thank you, Scott, for editing our episodes for the podcast. Larry, what do you have going on this week?
Wow, we're stepping up a lot of things. I'm trying to think what I can even talk about. There's some things coming from me down the pike that I'm jumping on. So you'll be hearing about them soon. But for right now, everybody, just again, whether you're on YouTube right now or not, please go over and like and subscribe on my channel. That would be a great thing to do this week. Otherwise, I'm Larry Nemecek on Twitter, and LarryNemecek.com is the hub of all things. How about you, Ollie?
I had a new episode of the Psych Show this past week called something, I forget exactly what it's called.
Something psychologically.
Yeah, it's about re-entry anxiety. So for those of you who are having to go back to work or back to school, how to deal with that and how to manage that, so you can check out that episode.
So you said it's called re-entering anxiety?
Re-entry anxiety. Re-entry into these parts of the world that we haven't really been in. So you can check out that episode. I'm working on an episode for next week about how to get started with therapy, how to find therapy, how to locate it. I haven't filmed it yet, but hopefully that'll happen soon. And beyond that, every Thursday I do office hours on my Discord for the Psyche, where I do a 1-hour chat with you about whatever you want to talk about. Mental health, psychology. Nathaniel, not you, unless you want to be there. Nathaniel was there this week, so good to talk to you, Nathaniel. We had a fun conversation. So that's what's going on. And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast. Give it a positive review. Give it a rating. That'll help more people to discover the show. And wow, Larry.
I should say 1 o'clock Tuesdays. Join me on Tuesdays live too. Also, yes, and Tuesdays when the Trek Files comes out from Roddenberry. So those two things.
This has been a lot of fun. Next week, I think, Larry, we can say we're doing Ferengi. We're doing Ferengi mental health.
If there's anything left over we didn't get into today.
Right. Thank you, everyone. It's been so much fun. And until next time, live long and prosper.
Yes, everybody. Trek well.